I'm joined by David Willetts, formerly the UK's Universities and Science Minister, now a member of the House of Lords as Lord Willetts. David, you've had experience of engaging with Asian universities in your role as Universities Minister when you were part of trade missions to Asia with the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. How do you see the big opportunities and the big challenges for Asian universities? What do you think sort of the key issues are?
I think the key challenge is the change in the relationship that we have with China's universities and Asia's universities as a whole. Historically, we've seen them as a source of students, and I hope that'll carry on, and indeed there is potential to grow the British market for overseas students. But that is only a small part of the relationship. What they're looking for is proper research links and research contacts. That's very important. And with things like the Newton Fund that I introduced, there's now more funding than there used to be, and it'll go even further, I hope, with the Global Challenges Fund for shared research projects. And these do have to be deeply shared. They want proper partnership. I think that's a fantastic area of expansion. And a challenge which I think we found it hard to address is I always found it easier if our Asian partners saw this as a genuine two-way street. And whilst I was saying I wanted to encourage their students to come and study in Britain, they were also interested in hearing how we can encourage more British students to come and study abroad. And I know it's tough, but anything that can be constructed, even if it's just a term, so that a British student at one of these universities has an experience in China, that massively enhances the credibility and the willingness to work with us.
But that is a very big problem to tackle, isn't it? As you say, there's very little tradition of British students heading to somewhere like China. What could be the future steps that either China or Britain might take to encourage that student flow to places like China? Well,
first of all, what I do realise, and what more importantly my Asian partners recognised, is that these exchanges needn't be symmetrical. They could be asymmetrical. Even if Chinese students were coming to Britain to study for 2 years, didn't mean we had to find lots of British students going to China for 2 years. So you can be more flexible. It can be a summer internship programme linked to visiting a university and some businesses it's associated with. It can be one term. The lessons could well be taught in English now. The British Council is working on these kind of programmes, as we know. And once it becomes manageable, and in particular a British student doesn't think that they're moving a year. Some of them didn't want to lose contacts with their peer group if they went away for a year and then came back and they got a different group of students around them. If they're not losing a year, I think a lot of things become possible.
And if you look at countries like Indonesia, where there's been huge population growth and economic growth, and in China, where there's the funding for the top research universities is really huge, coming from the government. Do there look like there's a lot of opportunities there that universities across the world could be sort of taking more advantage of?
There are, and of course, I mean, you mentioned countries, and we have got a British presence there. I remember going to Indonesia and the University of Northumbria launching a project in Indonesia. So there are projects underway. I would say that as well as classic scientific research projects, the other thing that's happening in Asia is these are societies that are changing fast. And they want to understand the changes that are happening to their own societies. So social science, history, economics of development, all that is very relevant for them. I remember going around a hospital in Shanghai where they were starting to do a proper cohort study. They're going to track the babies born at that hospital through their childhood and out into adulthood in China. And the brochure for it all was in Chinese, apart from one little phrase at the bottom, which said Alsbach study and the University of Birmingham. And this was one of our classic cohort studies that we'd done in the UK, and the University of Birmingham had been helping them design this cohort study for China. So there are lots of ways we can collaborate. It's not simply in physical sciences and engineering and life sciences. Social science and arts and humanities also matter.
And in terms of how British universities, for example, might do more collaboration, we've obviously seen things like the University of Nottingham's campus in China and various overseas branch campuses. Would you see that as a possible route for links between the Western Asia, or are there other things that universities could be doing in sort of emerging markets and fast-growing populations?
It's incredibly ambitious what some of our universities have done, and I've been both to the University of Liverpool's campus in China and Nottingham's campus in China, and they're both very impressive. It takes an enormous amount of work to get that up and running, and I hope there will be more, but I don't think there's going to be a large number of them. I think in fact, increasingly, I think the pattern will be the other way. I think we're going to start seeing Chinese universities setting up operations in the UK. The gossip is that there's going to be a higher education white paper from the Chinese government that will be more explicit about encouraging their universities to set up abroad. And that's a prize for us, but we must work hard for it. They may want to go to the US, they may want to go to the continent of Europe. It's very important to try to get them to the UK. So I think, but then of course, if they come to the UK, they'll be looking for academic partners. They won't want to set up in isolation. So there are opportunities for British universities to help educate Chinese students when they're here, but still under the auspices of, and perhaps at the physical base belonging to a Chinese university. I think that could be growth.
What do you think the Chinese government's interest in encouraging its universities to set up overseas would be? And so, second part of the question, do you think the British government would be very keen on hosting a Chinese university, and if so, why would they be keen?
I think for the Chinese, they observe that Western universities set up branch campuses, and as China's peaceful rise continues, they think they should be doing the same kind of things as the West does. And of course, it's another way of broadening your contacts and establishing permanent relationships with researchers in the West. And it's another way of giving your students the experience of being in the West. So I think that's what's in it for them. For the UK, I think it's a fantastic opportunity for us. And I'm sure that my successors in biz would want to encourage it, and I just hope the Home Office would as well.
David, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.